Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rent Prep for Landlords. This is podcast episode number 227. And today we're going to be talking about a phone call that we received on the Landlord Hotline. And we also have a couple in the news segments that are going to be featured that are good reminders to make sure that you have a buffer. You have a separation between your personal residence and your tenants. So we're going to be talking too about ways that you can make sure that you have that implemented and you have that buffer. All right. So without further ado, let's get to it.
Welcome to the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. And now your hosts, Stephen White and Eric Worrell.
So I always feel bad when the intro says, here's Steve White and Eric Worrell, because it's just Eric Worrell today. Steve is actually in the office next to me, training another screener. We're growing more and more here at Rent Prep, and part of that is our podcast audience. So thanks to you guys for running your background checks through rentprep.com. We always appreciate it. And we see a lot of you guys actually in the Facebook group. And we're going to be bringing that up later in the podcast. Actually, you know what? I'll bring it up right now because I know how I am. I will forget. One of the things we're doing in our Facebook group now is we're doing a pitch post on every Thursday. And I wanted to do a solid for one of our members who's been active and real helpful in the Facebook group. Her name is Sharon. And if you go to our Facebook group, Rent Prep for Landlords, if you haven't already joined the group, you're going to be asked for a password. That password is the word Laura, Laura. And you can tell me that you're coming from the podcast. That's how you heard about it. When you go into the group, you can do a search. So there's a search feature and you can look for pitch. And that's where people will be pitching services or offers or things that they have going on. And it's kind of cool because it's a way for you to be able to connect with people. Maybe you'll find somebody local to your area or they have a service that might be valuable to you. If you're somebody who's an investor and you're looking for properties, that's the post each week on Thursday afternoon. That'll be posted. And Sharon's actually got, I believe, 40 different rental properties that she's selling. So if you are somebody who's looking to invest, you can check out that weekly pitch post and you can find opportunities for yourself to see if there's maybe a good purchase or maybe a service that could be helpful for you. So check that out. And again, you can find this last week's pitch post where Sharon's got a bunch of properties for sale. And who knows, maybe you guys will end up doing business together. But that's just something that we're going to be doing weekly in addition to the regular conversation that's happening in the Facebook group. So what I want to do is start out with a landlord hotline call. So I've got a call for you here, and we're going to play that. And this is a pretty brief one, and hopefully it doesn't apply to you. But why don't we take a listen and discuss this call here that came in just a couple weeks ago.
Okay, so I inquired about an apartment, and he had texted back the landlord saying that it will be ready October 1st, will not rent to anyone with children. I thought that was pretty rude, and I thought that was actually illegal, so that's why I'm looking up on it now.
All right. We've covered this one in pretty good detail, but it's a good reminder that tenants and everything that you do is very searchable. If you're not following some of the basic laws, some of the basic protections that tenants have, and of course in this situation, the landlord was in the wrong, texting somebody saying that they won't rent to families with children. I mean, that's insane. And I'm sure most of the listeners, anybody who's listening to a podcast on being a better landlord understands that already. But it's a good reminder that when you're doing something, if you're just kind of shooting from the hip and you're not sure what your local laws or regulations are, a tenant can Google that, and next thing you know, they're even leaving a voicemail on a service like asking about it. But that's not going to end well for that landlord because A, you have a tenant that's very annoyed and upset because they have been denied a rental. B, they have a paper trail, so to speak, a digital one of the landlord texting them saying that no, I won't accept children in this rental property. And assuming that this landlord's not living in the property, if you're not familiar, it's called Mrs. Murphy's Exemption. In situations where, you live in the unit and there's like 4 units or less, sometimes you can be an exempt from your basic FHA, Fair Housing Act laws. But even that still, it's like, why would you ever, put that in text and say that and use that as a screening criteria. So make sure you are following the laws and regulations, because this is a great example of a tenant doing some quick research and realizing like, no, that's not okay. This person landed on a blog post on our site that says that landlords refuse to rent to families with children. That's the question being asked in the blog post and answered. So again, just a very quick Google search, and she found out, yeah, that's illegal. You can't do that. And now she's going to be following up with this landlord in some way, and this landlord might be paying some fines depending on how that goes. So always make sure you're crossing those T's, dotting those proverbial I's, and staying within the laws and regulations of your state. So now, real quick, you know what? I should tell you guys, if you do have any questions, feel free to give us a call. The Landlord Hotline that we have is a Google Voice number. It goes right to a voicemail. It's 716-218-0363. Again, that's 716-218-0363. You can call that voice number. Leave us a call. It can be anything you want. If you've got questions, comments, concerns, anything, and we'll do our best to answer those on the podcast going forward. So moving forward, I wanted to do a little bit of an in the news segment. And this week we got two recent news that have come up, and they're pretty similar in the fact that they have a theme that your tenant in no way should have your home address. If you have tenants, there's ways that you can set everything up so they don't know your home address, and make sure you're keeping that distance from them. And these are sadder stories that we're going to be sharing with you. And the first one that we're going to go to, this happened in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and a landlord had an incident at his home with an intruder where the landlord actually shot the intruder. And I'm going to play a little bit of the clip of the video for you right now.
Daryl Ellison had enough, so he went to his truck to grab that gun tonight. He says he just saved that woman's life. Daryl Ellison was minding his own last night. He had just fed his dogs when he got a knock at the door. It was his tenant.
A lady and her boyfriend that rented the trailer that I own in Hope Mills, she said they'd had a fight, and she stopped by here to talk about it.
The boyfriend wasn't far behind.
Had it locked, and they kicked the lock out, and come in the house and grabbed a hold of her and started dragging her through the kitchen, knocking all my stuff over.
Ellison usually keeps his gun at his side. This time, it was out of reach.
It's actually kind of tough to listen to. If you want to get the link, it's on abc11.com. It'll be in the show notes of this week's episode. But the guy's voice is trembling. He obviously went through a pretty traumatic experience. This landlord, basically what happened is he had a tenant who had come to his house. She was in fear of her own safety. Her boyfriend was abusing her. And after that tenant came to the house, the boyfriend followed suit. There was an altercation. This poor landlord ended up shooting and killing the tenant's boyfriend because his life was in jeopardy at that moment. And just an awful story that played out in Fayetteville, North Carolina recently. I mean, this article, this video is from September 28th, so this is very recent. And it's just one of those situations where, you wonder, like, how did this tenant know where this landlord lived? If they just had a few simple procedures in place where maybe this landlord was using a P.O. box. A lot of landlords are not going to have your own private office or some place that you do your business out of. But we see a lot of this with rent prep clients where they have a P.O. box set up. So if they have to drop rent off or send rent somewhere, it's going to a P.O. box. It's never the address of the landlord. Do your best to make sure, that you're not showing up in local searches. You can do a search of yourself, maybe put in your name and then put in an address or something like that. See if there's any information out there, because you never want to have your home address available to your tenants. Because if you do, maybe your tenant's fine, but your tenant's boyfriend is the one that's going to end up being a problem. And that you can see in this situation, the tenant came to the landlord, and then the boyfriend was brought in, and it ended up resulting in a shooting and a death. It's just a really sad story out of Fayetteville, North Carolina. And if you want to listen to that full video, you can go to the link in the show notes. That's abc11.com link. So the next story that we have coming out of Chicago on the south side, you might be filling in the blanks already, because I know that's kind of one of the murder capitals of the United States of America, unfortunately. But I'll play a little bit of this video for you. And again, this is a sad one that it could probably be, prevented with a different process in place on collecting rent. All right, let's take a listen.
tenants murdered an elderly Rolling Meadows landlord whose decomposing body was found in a sewer in the South Side. That, according to prosecutors. The suspects were in court today, and Larry Yellen was there.
He wanted to help the people that he was renting to. These are people that nobody else would rent to.
Shantan Kathareddy says his father, Vasudeva, cared about his tenants in neighborhoods like Englewood. Today, two of those tenants, 25-year-old Elijah Green and 22-year-old Tony Green, were charged with murdering the 76-year-old landlord. The two brothers allegedly called Kathareddy about repairing a leaky roof. Then Tony stood watch while Elijah choked him. It happened in August, but the victim's body wasn't found until last week, when cell phone records led them to a sewer near the Greens' home.
It was discovered that a witness conducted Google searches on a phone number registered to Tony Green about how long it takes for a body in sewer water to decompose.
Prosecutors say the two men stole $1,600 they found in Kathareddy's car. The victim's son says he actually met the Green brothers while searching for his dad last August.
These are two brothers that were shaking my hand and giving me hugs, expressing their condolences.
Prosecutors say both suspects have given video confessions, but each of them tried to blame the other for actually choking the victim.
I kind of debated whether or not we were even going to have that one on the episode. I mean, it's kind of a dark episode between these two stories. This one, again, coming out of Chicago South Side. It's just rough. Landlord goes out, complaint over water leaks in the house, ends up getting murdered, choked to death, and the $1,600 he had on him was stolen. And it says here that the 76-year-old victim who went missing August 4th while he was collecting rent and doing odd jobs at his properties. So, we're talking about an area where these are probably Class D properties. It's a certain clientele of renters that usually, are associated with that type of property, and you have to make sure that you're being safe. This is just a terrible, terrible, sad reminder. If you are going out to collect rent, ideally try to collect rent digitally or have it mailed to a P.O. box. If you're collecting rent, make sure you're going about it in a safe way. Don't go out collecting rent at 8, 9 o'clock at night. Take somebody with you if possible, or just have a system set up in place where, they're mailing the rent to your P.O. box. And it's a check, if that's the system that works for you with the lower class properties. Just think about what you're doing. Think about how you're managing the properties. Don't put yourself in a scary situation. And, a lot of times, if a renter's desperate and they find out that you've been collecting rent, you got a bullseye on your back that maybe this person's got a bunch of rent money in the vehicle too. So I don't know how much that played into this story, because it sounds like he was called out for an issue with the a leaky roof, but the fact that they knew that he had money on his truck too made you believe that maybe these two individuals understood that they could get some quick cash if they call this guy out while he's collecting rent. So there's always these kind of situations. We talked earlier about the P.O. box, setting one of those up. We've talked on other episodes about putting a Google Voice number in place instead of your personal phone number. That's another way. I mean, even that number that we use for the Landlord Hotline is just a Google Voice line. They're free to set up. You can use that for your communication then. Other things with landlord safety are if you're doing a showing, you probably don't know the person, that you're doing the showing for. So make sure you get some details about that person before you do the showing. Perhaps you start the showing in a public space. You ask them for an ID. You snap a picture of that ID and share it. Do it right in front of them. You just go, just for precautions, I always, snap a picture of somebody's license and we'll send it back to the office, or bring somebody with you for the showing. Do public showings instead of private showings. These are all ways that you can keep yourself safe as a landlord throughout the process, and make sure that you're not giving them, information and access to your personal home. All of these situations are very sad that we listen to here, and including the Landlord Hotline where the tenant was being taken advantage of. Just make sure that, you're doing your best to make sure you're not putting yourself in a compromised situation, especially when collecting rent. That one's definitely a little bit more dangerous than most, since, the people that you're collecting from may have the inclination that you have rent in your pocket from other renters, and that you might have a bullseye in your back in some ways there. So don't love to do these episodes where it's a little bit more dark and a little sad, but it's a good reminder from a sad situation to sad stories of being able to protect yourself and making sure you're keeping yourselves in arm's length distance from your renters when it comes to collecting rent or handling tenant maintenance requests, or making sure that you don't have your personal address readily accessible to your renters. So that's going to do it for this week, but we will pick it up next week. Hopefully have Steve back as he's training a new employee this week. And again, join the Rent Prep for Landlords Facebook group. Check out that pitch post that's coming every Thursday. If you're somebody who's, just looking to connect with people in your local area, or maybe there's services or something that you can offer, that's always good to hear about. And we appreciate you guys listening. Podcast numbers are jumping back up again. So hopefully you're getting good value out of the podcast. And if you have any suggestions, feel free to email me, eric@rentprep.com. We're going to be looking to kind of switch things up here in the near future. So always looking for good feedback from our listeners as well. So until next week, everybody take care and have a great rest of your week. All right, take it easy.